Watercourse Agency meeting Thursday, July 20th. It's now special meeting. It's now 6:04. Want to do the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, fire evacuation procedures are out, straight out those doors and exit the building, or go down the stairs and out that way. Roll call.
Donna Corbin-Serbinski, absent or delayed. Kevin Zorda. Virginia Higley. Robert Hendrickson.
Here.
Ann Collins. Nancy Martin. Here. Phil Kober.
Here.
And I'm sorry, you're Mr. Chris Renard. Renard.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, I'd like to seat Chris so we can have a quorum here. Everybody. Public communications. Is there anybody that wants to speak today that's not on the agenda? Anybody that would like to speak about something not on the agenda? All right. Agent correspondence. Anybody have anything?
Go ahead. You have something, Phil? Okay. I just wanted to let the commissioners know that I had some discussion with town council members and the town manager in reference to the delay in having members of the commission being appointed in a timely fashion. I just wanted to let you know that I just wanted to find out why there was a delay and what happened and what the plan is moving forward. And I had some great conversations with all of those people, and I feel confident that this will not be an issue in the future.
No, I was just going to say there's several of us that were reappointed in order for this meeting, so I just want to thank the council for making that happen, and I just want to welcome our new member, Christopher, to the agency.
All right.
Yes, welcome.
I also want to welcome Chris, and I also had a conversation with some council members about the appointees that were not on the board, and I'm glad it all got resolved at the last meeting. All right, approval of minutes from June 20th meeting.
Bob, I think we have agent correspondence first. Oh, we did that. I'm sorry.
We just
Forgive
did
me.
that. That's all
Forgive
right.
me. That was
Thank you
us.
for helping.
Sorry. I apologize.
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from Tuesday, June 20th special meeting?
So made.
Second.
Roll call.
Discussion.
Any discussion?
Any discussion on the,
No.
Phil, any notes?
Only minor thing I noticed on page 3, the first paragraph where it talks about Ms. Driver reported there were no updates for the enforcement reports. It's just missing the header that was a that it should be titled enforcement reports to match the agenda.
Okay.
So that would be the only amendment I would propose, just adding that header under the first sentence of page 3.
All right. Roll call.
Donna Corbin-Serbinski. Okay, thank you. Let's see. Nancy Martin, yes. Phil Kober.
Yes, as amended.
Robert Hendrickson.
Yes, as amended.
Chris Renaud.
Yes, as amended.
Am I saying that correctly?
Reno?
Reno,
That's-
thank you.
I'm not too picky.
All right. Can I have a,
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we move agenda item 7 down to in between items 11 and 12.
do I have a second?
Yes, second.
Okay. Do we need a vote on that?
We could do a voice vote.
Voice vote? Okay. All in favor?
A.
Yes.
Aye.
Every yea. All right. Continued public hearings, we don't have any. New public hearings, we do not have any. Old business. IW 684, 210 Moody Road, application for a subdivision, Top Knot LLC, applicant owner, map 100, lot 1, Lot 11, I-1 zone. Welcome. State your name and address, please.
Good.
No.
Any better? No.
Give it a minute to.
Hello.
There you go.
Good evening. Brian Balicki, Furrow Engineering, on behalf of the owner, Top Knot. We were in front of the commission at, I think, your last meeting on June 20th, presenting a proposed subdivision of existing industrial land on Moody Road. In the staff report at the last meeting, there was some housekeeping items on the plan, such as clarifying the new proposed utilities. We've addressed all those comments. We added a sidewalk down Taylor Road at request of the city engineer. And we've further expanded some of the stormwater management systems for the new developments that are undetermined, but we put a maximum impervious surface in place so that we could design the stormwater management system. So as a refresher, existing lot, which is the current manufacturing distribution center, and then there is a second lot in the middle and a larger lot at the corner. So we have a underground infiltration and detention system on the upper lot, and then a traditional surface detention system on the middle lot, both of which discharge to an easement on the south side of the property, off-site to the wetland resource area, as they currently do today. The goal of the stormwater management systems is to essentially match the pre and post runoff rates. So the design we presented on the middle lot achieves that via a surface detention basin. Again,
Excuse me, Brian, real quick. May the record reflect Chair Corbin Sabinski entered the meeting at 6:10 p.m. Continue.
Excuse me, apologize for being late.
no problem.
Go ahead.
So, since the last meeting, we've submitted preliminary stormwater management calculations, reports, et cetera, to the city engineer. As of this afternoon, the only comment we have, and I think the only point of contention for this commission, Georgie, correct me if I'm wrong, is the treatment of the area within the upland area. The 100-foot regulated area is right here. Currently, we're showing no work within any of the jurisdictional areas or the upland review area, but the town engineer has requested that we continue the stormwater swale off of the two new lots closer to the detention basin. That comment came this afternoon, and that's easily addressable, and I sketched it up, Georgie. I didn't submit it, but I wanted to get feedback from the commission as to how far we wanted to bring that swale towards the wetland. And we've been trying to stay away from all the upland review area by staying outside of the 100 feet because the natural topography does direct the wetland, the runoff towards the wetland anyway. But at recommendation of the city engineer, we're willing to extend the swale. There's an existing tree line right here that ranges from 60 to 20 feet from that resource area. I don't see the benefit of removing trees to build a swale. So that would be the only feedback we'd be looking for to address that comment, is how far do we extend it?
So just for some clarification for our wetlands members, our assistant town engineer has been out of the office for about 2 weeks or so. He just got back in today, and before he left for the day, he had a moment to review the revised plan, the revised narrative, and the revised stormwater maintenance plan. At this point, it's still not complete in OpenGov, but he did comment and say, and looking at the plans, a swale is not necessary, but it is preferable to help define the easement area for future maintenance and help keep the storm flows separated from the existing detention basin. So basically, a swale is preferred by our engineering department, and it should be included for the drainage easement to help maintenance in the future. And then there was another comment that the planning department had about the 90-degree angles on the topography within the drainage easement going towards the wetlands. They should be rounded out a little bit more to prevent angles, because then the pulling will pull in those corners, and that would help stormwater flow easier. And then the last thing that we had was the PR level separator surrounded by the 5-inch crushed trap rock energy dissipator. That should be more defined to as exactly how that's going to help drain stormwater into the drainage easement. And then lastly, the topography lines for the proposed grading on the west side of Lot 2. Topography is flowing west towards Lot 1, so any water drainage on Lot 2 is going to be entering the property on Lot 1, right, by the, what do you call that? My mind. Yeah, by this, thank you, by the slope, word escaped my head. So that should just be reversed. That way water stays on Lot 2 instead of draining onto Lot 1. That way all stormwater can be directed towards the detention basin and then eventually the drainage easement. So those are the only things that staff is still working on. At this point in time, my staff report had 2 recommended motions for the agency, depending on how you would like to vote tonight. If you choose to continue the application until September 5th, the applicant would have to provide us an extension, or you could choose to approve the application as is with another recommended site-specific condition of the swale being included, the topography being more leveled out, the topography on the west side being reversed, and then more details for the PR level separator.
So I can get a little further explanation on Georgie's comments. The topography of the proposed swale, that's easily addressable. It's kind of tapering the extent of the swale back to the natural topography easier. Our design called for a 20-foot wide swale to meet the flow rates. It's drawn right now closer to 30. So there's room within, I guess I'll back up. This is the proposed stormwater easement here. That allows these 2 lots to legally discharge water across land of another. So we can easily accommodate that comment with just changing the proposed topography lines. As far as the runoff of Lot 2 to 1, the question is right now, all of this field comes down this property line and into Lot 1. So the redevelopment of Lot 3 will capture that runoff, and the redevelopment of Lot 2 should capture that runoff and drastically reduce the flow that's coming into this. What we've shown conceptually now is a large swale running the length of the property, and it stops right about here. So we've reduced the runoff that does leave the lot significantly, but we can extend that swale easily to Moody Road and capture all of the runoff that's going this way, so that it would be captured, sent through our stormwater management system, and then discharged properly. So I think these are all easily addressable comments, in other words.
I do agree with that. The only recommendation that I still have is the fact that the slope on the west side where you were pointing by the swale, it starts at 184 and then goes down to 180, draining onto Lot 1. It should not be draining onto Lot 1. All water should be kept on each individual lot and managed on each lot. So it should technically be flowing south towards the detention basin to drain into the drainage easement area.
So there is a small area of runoff that's continuing to flow off-site right now per the plan. We can address most of it. The challenge we have is the detention basin has to be above the groundwater elevation. And at a certain point, the topography at the very edge of the site is kind of below what we'd be able to capture properly. So there might be a very, very small sliver of lawn that would continue to run off, but it's no different than what it's doing today.
So the only question I'd ask is, are you guys open to requesting an extension? I know just because of the timeline, because we don't meet in August.
Right.
So if we need an extension for September to get the revised plans, would you be amicable to that?
Obviously, the property owner would appreciate any progress he can make, but understanding some of these items are outstanding.
Excuse me, I do just want to mention one more thing, that the applicant cannot create an increase in runoff from one site to another.
And I will comfortably make the statement that we are drastically reducing the runoff that is currently flowing through the field into this lot, because we're capturing this whole piece here
Into the swale.
and putting it into the detention basin. Currently, that all flows into this existing lot.
I just don't see how that's reflected on the plan because the topo is saying the opposite.
There's a significant swale, Georgie, shown along the lot line here. That's going to capture everything but what's beyond it. I'm going to call it maybe a 5 or 10 foot strip that's lower than the proposed detention basin. That would continue to flow off site.
Hi, Lori Witten, Town Planner for the record. I think we're just wondering whether or not the drainage calculations show that the pre to post development has decreased, as you're saying, so, because it cannot increase.
Correct. So the stormwater report we submitted shows a reduction in flows for all storm events, and that was assuming the maximum 66% impervious surface, which I find unlikely to be met on this site. But if it were to be, we're still meeting that burden.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, I'd like to see it go down into the basin, instead of towards Moody Road.
I'm sorry?
I'd like to see the runoff go into the basin instead of Moody Road.
Absolutely no runoffs going into Moody Road right now. Moody Road is what I'll call the high side of the site.
Yeah.
Everything is flowing away from Moody Road
that's
naturally right now, and that'll be further accomplished by the development of the site.
It might be more beneficial if I can make a recommendation for your plan for future landowners and whatnot, and for the benefit of the wetlands, is if you have all water directed towards the detention basin, towards that wetland drainage easement, instead of just sheet flowing onto Lot 1. Even though there is a natural swale there that you pointed out, water should still be directed towards that general location, because that's the whole point of the detention basin.
Let's capture it.
And I guess what I'm trying to iterate that we have proposed contours that are trying to achieve that, Georgie. This contour line here and the swale here, and then the natural topography is, once you get up here, it's all directed at this corner.
You'd have to switch the topography, though, because right now you have 184 on the high point on Lot 2, and then 180 on the low point towards Lot 1. So water is going to flow down that little area into Lot 1.
I can adjust the contours to
Yes, that's what I'm
further
saying.
prove that.
That those contours should be adjusted, that way all the water flows in the correct direction, and there's no complications in the future between property owners and flooding or any water issues. And then the spreader should still have those details about how exactly that's going to work in capturing water as well.
Yeah, so would you give us an extension? Are you up for the extension? Or?
And I do just want to point out that if the applicant does give an extension per the agency's request, it does not implement their PCC application. Staff was reviewing the statutes today, and it automatically extends the PCC extension of no fault of the applicant, so the applicant wouldn't have to use any of their allowed extension requests.
For P&Z?
For P&Z, yes.
No.
Yeah, so I'll just add, I mean, obviously for a subdivision application, we're not as thorough as a wetlands application, but we do have the outstanding question of the drainage running off into the basin versus the upland review area. So I would be in favor of continuing this to our next meeting.
Yeah. And then we have all the plans and site plans accurate and, yeah.
But is there any feedback about that initial question I had, is how far do we take this swale, Georgie, before we let it spread naturally?
So that would be something we can discuss with John Cabibbo and the engineering department to address the drainage part. Of course, you don't want to disturb any trees there, but the significance of it is to have proper maintenance of that drainage easement. Because after this is all approved, the ultimate fact comes down to who is responsible for maintaining it. And I understand the application noted Lot 2 and Lot 1, but ultimately it should be clarified on the plans, and it should show that detail just to be sure that everything will be in place correctly and that it will flow in the correct location.
Yeah. I have to agree.
Madam Chair, I'll move to continue IW 684 210 Moody Road, application for subdivision, Top Knot LLC, applicant owner, map 100, lot 11, I-1 zone, to the next meeting of September 5th, 2023.
Second.
Okay, do we have any discussion? Roll call?
Donna Corbin-Srabinsky.
Yes.
Robert Hendrickson.
Yes.
Nancy Martin, yes. Phil Kober.
Yes.
Chris Reno.
I do want to clarify before we move on, the applicant will have to request the extension.
Yes.
I have a request written if you'd like it.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That helps.
3 minutes to spare before lunch, so it's not the best.
So no further discussion. Motion passes, 5 in favor.
Who seconded it? I'm sorry, I missed it.
I did.
Oh.
Yeah, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would like to make a recommendation, now that our chair is here, to move the town attorney report up, but it's totally your decision to make.
Still up?
To move the town attorney
The town
report.
attorney report down to 11.
Yeah, we moved it to the end of
Yeah.
11.
Abbey Road would be next if you
Yeah.
didn't want to do it.
How long is the town attorney report?
Shouldn't take that long. I'm thinking 15 minutes maybe.
This is going to be
People
about,
think, yeah,
this will be about your questions.
yeah.
Do Abbey
Do we
Road
want to do
first.
Abbey Road
Let's
first?
do Abbey Road.
Just
Let's
to
do
finish
Abbey-
the old
to-
business
Yeah,
and
to
then-
finish old business, and then we'll move on. Thank you.
Evening, everyone. Derek Donnelly on behalf of the applicant, Jarmark Tobacco LLC and Jarmark Real Estate LLC. Nice to see you all again. I know we're listed on the agenda as being tabled.
Yes, we have to remove from the table.
Yes, if possible, that would be great.
Yep, have a motion to remove.
Madam Chair, I move to remove item 10B from the table, DPN 2023-0324D, 147 Abbey Road, request for jurisdictional ruling for the expansion of the existing pond, Jarmark Tobacco LLC applicant, Jarmark Real Estate LLC owner, map 85, lot 16, R44 zone.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Donna Corbin-Srabinsky.
Yes.
Robert Hendrickson.
Yes.
Nancy Martin, yes. Phil Kober.
Yes.
Chris Reno.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes, it was removed from the table. Before we start, Attorney Donnelly, I have a question. I'm wondering if you applied for a jurisdictional ruling or not. I
Yes,
can't believe you did.
we
Did
we
you apply
received
for
a
it?
notice of violation
Right.
on March the 8th. On March 21st, we were in front of the commission, at which time the discussion was that the best way to handle the violation was to seek a DPN. We subsequently filed the DPN for all 4 of the properties that were going to be worked on, then withdrew 3 of them. So
Correct.
pending before you is only the DPN for 147 Abbey Road.
And it's just a regular DPN.
Correct.
That's what I thought. Okay, so moving forward, this is, for the record, this is DPN 2023-0324D, 147 Abbey Road, for the expansion of the existing pond, Jarmark Tobacco LLC, applicant, Jarmark Real Estate LLC, owner, map 85, lot 16, R44. This is not a jurisdictional ruling. And we'll hear from the attorneys later on about jurisdictional rulings, but.
Madam Chair, can you clarify why it's not a jurisdictional ruling, a determination?
First of all, they did not request one.
They did, though. That's what the application's for, the
No,
determination
it's
of.
a normal it's a normal DPN.
That's what
For
they are,
jurisdictional
though.
DPNs, public cannot request a public hearing. They cannot appeal our decision in court, and it's decided by the staff. This is a normal DPN, determination of need, that we've been doing for the last, I don't know how many years. So I'm sure Don, attorney, can explain a little bit if he wants, but
Well, I think you hit
I
the
just
nail.
did, yeah.
I think the nail on the head here.
Yeah.
And again, this is very unique because we're
Yes.
trying to resolve the notice of violation that was set forth on the 8th of March.
Correct.
Again, just to sort of recap, last fall, my clients were looking to do off-season maintenance of some farm ponds. They reached out to staff, going back and forth with staff via email. Staff granted permission to move forward with that because it is work that farm pond maintenance is permitted as of right under the statute. We've been through this in the past before. There was some confusion, I think, between my client and the staff about how much was able to be done there. They started doing some excavation related to the collapse of the wall of the farm pond as they went to dredge it out. We've talked about this before. That resulted in them having to cut the edge of the farm pond in order to make it larger, and the result of all of that work was a larger farm pond. After the work was completed, the notice of violation was issued. In addition to a notice of violation or a cease and desist order related to excavation of the property that was dealt with before the Zoning Board of Appeals. Okay, so now we are just talking about this from a perspective of wetlands, not a perspective of excavation, which is being dealt with in the Zoning Board of Appeals. So related to the wetlands use, the discussion I think was pretty straightforward. I think we all agree this is permitted as of right to maintain the farm pond.
correct?
Okay, and then the question really, from our point of view, was, which was raised in the notice of violation, was were wetland soils disturbed, but related to the excavation? Was anything deposited on top of the existing wetlands? And what you heard from us at the last meeting with, or the first June meeting with with our soil scientist was that he went out there, he dug 10 test pits. There was no wetland soils disturbed that were existing on the property at the time. Okay, obviously, the farm ponds were expanded, that and everything was spread there. Now, why this is important and why we're sort of rushing back in tonight is that one of the things we said here and we agreed to was that we weren't going to touch anything until such time as you made the determination of permanent need. We're now at the end of July. This, as we've stated before, these are fields that are used for fall crops. We're hoping to get the DPN decided so that we can go in and plant and and get those fall crops harvested in a timely manner. So that's sort of a recap of where we are. Staff, after the last meeting, did ask for some time to review the soil scientist report. I believe that's been done. They also asked us to resubmit a number of documents. We did do that on Friday of last week. My understanding from staff is that that was not enough time to get it into your packets. We did bring it with us tonight in case you'd like to review it. But really, at the end of the day, it's what I just told you. The narrative is what I just explained. And then just one other thing I would add. And I think Ms. Driver brought this up with me, and it's a good point. Early on, we were talking about whether or not a survey was going to be needed. A survey of the property was going to be needed. After the report from our soil scientists, Datum Engineering, we decided it wasn't necessary. I mean, if there was a question about whether the wetlands are disturbed, we thought at that point we might need to do some surveying and some specific delineation, particularly of the borders of the property. But in light of the fact that no wetland soils were disturbed, we thought it was no longer necessary to undergo that expense. So as a result, I think that sort of recaps where we are tonight. And just respectfully, we'd ask that the commission grant the DPN so we can move forward with the fall harvesting and be done with the violation.
Do you have the documents?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, sure. If you have them, we'll take them.
Excuse me. I do just want to read an email I sent to Owen way back when in March, just so we're all on the same page. Not that I do not disagree that, agricultural activities are exempt. It's in the statute. This is an agricultural activity. However, there are certain requirements to meet the exempt qualifications. So an email I sent back in March says, "Good morning, Owen. Happy Thursday. I have compiled some useful information to help navigate the complexities of farming exemptions. Thank you. Wetlands regs and case law that I believe will benefit you as a farmer and equip you with the tools you need to effectively navigate your projects with the wetlands regulations for better ease. I spent a fair amount of time reviewing your application proposals and materials submitted, the Enfield wetlands regs, the state statutes, case law, the definition of agricultural under CGS section 1-1Q, and speaking with Darcy Winther of CT Deep Land and Water Resource Division. As we are aware, according to the state statute, certain farming activities are allowed as of right. For, case law cited Town of Canterbury versus Christopher DOJ 2009. One being farm ponds of 3 acres or less essential to the farming operation, which Mr. Jarmock is pursuing, which is what you are proposing for your existing pond expansion. Under this law, you are allowed to have ponds on the property up to 3 acres in size total. That can be permitted as an as-of-right activity, following proper notification to the Wetlands Agency, DPN. The statute does not limit the amount of ponds on the property, only the size. If you wish to expand beyond the allowed 3-acre size, that would require a full permit application for ponds greater than 3 acres in size in general. Note, once a water feature has been created on a property, it is subject to the jurisdiction of the Wetlands Agency. This includes farm ponds, both old and new. This is because wetlands refers to soil types, not necessarily the presence of water by itself. However, you must provide proof that the expansion of the pond is essential to the farming operation, as stated in the statute. The agency needs this information to be able to make their decision. Jorgensen versus Chapdelaine versus Town of Eastford 2014 case law example. They can deny your notification and require you to get a permit if they find this expansion is not essential to your farming operation. Here are some questions to consider, including in your application narrative if the expansion is in fact essential. Have these ponds experienced drought before to the point where your farm has been experiencing a lack of water resource? Are your farming operations expanding to the point where you need a larger water supply than what is existing? How does the current pond size meet or not meet the needs of your farming operation? How has the pond worked in the past? Do you have another source of water? As long as you can provide enough information for the Wetlands Agency to be able to determine that the proposed activity does not require a permit, then the law is satisfied and your request would be permitted as an as-of-right activity under the farming exemptions CGS 22A-40. Another factor to keep in mind with this type of project is the amount, location, and removal of sediment. If you are removing sediment from the existing pond locations and depositing them into another wetland area, or an upland review area, even if that identified area is already disturbed or is crop field, you are essentially filling in that wetland area. Filling of these areas requires a wetlands permit no matter the circumstance. Case law example, Taylor versus Conservation Commission of the Town of Fairfield, 2011. You can base the wetlands location off our town's GIS if you do not wish to hire a soil scientist to verify those areas. If you deposit the sediment into areas outside of the wetlands and the upland review areas, then that would be where the wetlands jurisdiction stops. However, this statute does not exempt you from the zoning authority, unfortunately. Therefore, in terms of excavation for your project, you would have to go through the proper process to be allowed to excavate on the property for the pond. This is where the A2T2 site plan requirement comes into play. The zoning authority would need to know more technical information about your project, such as the amount of cubic yards to be removed from the site, where these soils are going, and the general details of the project. Excavation work requires a special permit from PZC. Thank you for taking the time to read this information, and I'm confident that the information provided has shed some light on the complex intersection between farming exceptions and wetlands regulations. Please reach out to me if you have questions or concerns. Georgie Driver. That was just something I sent to Owen to help him, because obviously he's going to have a lot more in the future for his farms, and I just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to be on the correct page and all that. But from
So Attorney Donnelly?
Yeah, look, we appreciate guys and your staff, respectfully. They also pay me to give them guidance, so they're probably going to take my advice where there's some conflicting examples. So, with that, I will just add, I mean, I think one of the things that was missing from that narrative was that it's not just the farm pond under 3 acres that's permitted as of right, it's also farming. And the definition of farming under the general statutes, it's 1-1Q. And again, we've gone over this before with
many
prior
times.
DPNs, but it includes the construction, operation, or maintenance of ditches, canals, reservoirs, or waterways used exclusively for farming purposes. And although I didn't mention it in my intro today, we have talked about that this is the only source of water on that property. Previously, you permitted a expansion through a DPN of some irrigation systems that were put in
Yep.
across the street. So it's not only just this property that's being irrigated by this pond, it's also the farmland across the street as well. And again, and particularly for the new commissioner here, the reason why this was sought out to begin with back in November of last year is because when that new system was put in place, it was we quickly learned that the sediment at the bottom of the pond was clogging it up and causing it not to flow properly. So
Falls under maintenance.
exactly right. So again, that's why this work was originally conducted. And, candidly, that's why staff gave permission for them to go forward with this in the fall. Again, with the caveat, I understand the expansion part was, is something that probably should have been clarified, or as we talked about at one of the last meetings, once those walls started collapsing, we should have come back to staff. And
It would have been very useful if your narrative included that information, but from 8.9, all DPN applications have to follow the application requirements of Section 7, which this does not. So that was the only thing missing, making it technically not complete, which is why we were missing that information. And the fact that the statute says it has to be essential, which was not included in the applicant's narrative.
Okay, so we agree that this is as of right, to enhance and maintain. The soil scientist's report says there's no fill in the wetlands. We have received all our documents. So, I think we need to move forward with this application.
And I
Let
think
them as a right,
in the
we
new
have a right
narrative,
as
I mean, we do say it's
Yeah.
essential for the farming operation.
Yes, you did say
And just for the
I
record,
did
though
see
that
that.
is true,
I did see that.
8.9 says instruction
me.
of applications involving activity notifications through DPNs, where 8.9A3 says the applicant shall follow the application requirements of Section 7. I do not believe we can waive or any of those requirements.
I'm still unclear what we haven't done. I mean,
Yeah,
I'll
I am
tell you
too,
that
so.
at this point. I said I'm unclear what we haven't done at this point. I mean, we've,
Yeah, we have all the
I
documents.
feel like we're a broken record here. This is
Well,
our,
We need
in
to move on.
section 7
Excuse me, we need
cases
to move
a
on.
site plan showing the proposed
Excuse me?
activity and existing proposed conditions, where it says 1 inch equals 40 feet, and that just gives examples of what the site plan should include, and that's just not involved in this application. So I have to respectfully disagree that the applicant has failed to prove how this is essential to the farming operation.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
water is essential to the farming operation.
Yes, of course it is.
I'm going to make a motion to approve DPN 2023-03-24D, 147 Abbey Road for the expansion of the existing pond. Jarmark Tobacco LLC, applicant Jarmark Real Estate LLC, owner map 85, lot 16, R44.
Commissioner Hendrickson, the motion should be to not require a permit. That's what you meant to say.
I'm sorry.
That they don't require a
That-
permit, because,
I'm sorry.
Yes,
I'd like
that's
to make
the
a
right
motion that they
term.
do not
Thank you.
require a permit.
yes, because they're farming. Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Nancy, thank you. Any discussion?
So I'm just going to add my 2 cents on this. Obviously, as a DPN, we're really only looking at 2 things. We're looking at location and activity. Obviously, activity for the farming side, I think we're all agreeing. Maintenance is as of right. I think the expansion is the question that was raised. In regards to the soil mapping, I think the GIS has it as upland review area. And then we have, the test pits that you did. That sketch was a little rough, but I think I did follow it. And I know the question came in that there was stuff stockpiled on what may have been an upland review area. So I personally would still probably like a little more review on this, but again, that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I just had a question on the stockpiling from the picture I believe we saw earlier. That was my only concern, was where that stockpile went.
It's still there. Yeah, we're-
Because they
we-
weren't allowed to touch it.
It's not on the
We
site
left it
plan.
alone until we were
Yeah,
done.
they weren't
so-
allowed to touch it.
And we obviously have the wetland soil now delineated,
Not
so
on the site
the original plan was to spread that's actually very good topsoil, so it'll
gonna use
go
it.
onto farmland that's not wetlands, which are now pretty well delineated.
Correct. Okay. Roll call, Nancy?
Donna Corbin Sobinsky.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Robert Hendrickson.
Yes.
Nancy Martin, yes. Phil Kober.
Against.
Chris Reno.
Against.
3 in favor, 2 against, motion passes.
The motion fails. It's 4 in favor. The motion fails. A permit is required.
Can someone vote who hasn't heard the rest of the application?
Yeah, I know, I'm wondering.
If he's watched all the past YouTube videos and if he feels strongly enough to vote, then he can state that on the record.
Jenny can vote.
What are we voting on?
Jenny just entered the meeting and missed some.
147 Abbey Road.
Okay.
For them to not require a determination of permit need.
Jenny can't vote because she didn't hear the latest information. Yes, you're welcome. The motion does not pass.
Sorry.
Okay.
So, for the record, Jenny arrived at 6:44.
6.
Madam Chair, I move that we input item 7 at this point after conclusion of old business.
Second.
7, okay, we're moving 7 to old business. So, Phil and Bob. Any discussion? Hearing none, moving, roll call?
Donna Corbin Sobinsky.
Yes.
Now is Ginny voting?
Yes, she is.
Thank you. Virginia Higley.
Here.
We're moving.
say yes.
We're just moving.
Yes.
We're just moving
Yes.
Okay. Robert Hendrickson.
Yes.
Nancy Martin, yes. Phil Kober.
Yes.
Chris Reno.
Yes.
6 in favor, motion passes. So now the town attorney report?
So as requested by our wetlands agency, they request the town attorneys to be present just to review some of the legal opinions that we've received in the past.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the commission. Congratulations for those who were reappointed, and welcome to our new commissioner. We'll keep this brief because you have other business to do, but to take care of tonight. So I'm Jim Tallberg, your town attorney. I'm joined by my immediate predecessor, Attorney Maria Elsden, who you're all well familiar with. And as indicated by Georgie, this is really a continuation of the land use training that we had June 1, where we ran out of time and we didn't get to some of the issues that wanted to be discussed concerning wetlands. So we thought that we would come here tonight with just a brief presentation, primarily from staff, but as necessary and appropriate, most likely Attorney Elsden will chime in on some of these things. But to set the table, the Wetlands Commission, just like all land use commissions, is of limited authority, constrained by the state statutes. And pursuant to the town charter, Chapter 5, Section 1, the town attorney is the legal advisor for all boards and commissions, obviously the Wetlands Commission, and upon request shall furnish those boards with written opinions and any questions involving these legal issues essentially fall to the town attorney. Now, we may not always agree on these, but it is our role as town attorney to provide those opinions. We do that with input from staff, and the goal is really to ensure that there's compliance with the law. A lot of this stuff is really complicated, and reasonable minds can disagree on these matters. But with that backdrop, we wanted to just have a couple of issues addressed, and so I'll now turn it over to Georgie.
Thank you, Jim. So the first item on our list of review is the DPNs. So we received a legal opinion way back when, and it didn't really make sense. There was a misapplication of terminology, and as a result, after a lot of research, we have figured out the root of the problem, and it comes from the regulations. We were comparing the regs with the model regs, and for what was adopted in Enfield way back when, and the model regs actually do not include a lot of sections that our regs do include. For example, the DPN section 7.4, it should be agent's decision, but it says a prospective applicant may request the agency to determine whether or not a proposed activity involves a significant impact activity. And then the end of the sentence says determination of permit need application. That's where things get confusing because technically they're not applications, they are requests. So that was just one of the things that we had to clarify. So we have a new legal opinion drafted from May 10th, 2023 with the correct terminology answering these questions about whether or not a DPN is subject to a public petition period. And I believe Jim and Maria can shed some light on that. No?
I have a question before you start. So the last application just failed because he does not need a determination of need, so that failed. So does that mean he needs a determination of need?
He needs a permit.
He needs a permit?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I think especially because there is a pending case related to this, I'm a little uncomfortable commenting on it. I know just conceptually I can see asking the question, but
We did do the same thing for 92 Post Office. Their DPN was denied and it was required to get a permit. But the fact of the matter is DPNs are not subject to public petition periods, neither are jurisdictional rulings.
yeah, that is accurate. I think what was unique about 92 is that it was similar to a legal opinion that took place in 2013, and that's where the agent didn't feel comfortable about whether or not it was something beyond significant or minimal impact. And it ultimately went to the agency. And the difference is, I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but the difference is under 22A 42A C1, it's the agency decision. And when it's an agency decision, then there is going to be, the petition process is appropriate. When it is the C2, then it's typically agent approval, and then the agency and the petition do not come into play.
So the question I'd offer, and it seems like we're kind of in agreement. So right now, our municipal wetland regulations and our application form reflects that a DPN is an application, and I think that's where these issues arise.
That is correct.
I know we've been talking about it for a while, staffing and revising our wetlands regulations. Can you guys provide some guidance on that? Should there be two separate for DPN versus wetlands application?
Well, first of all, just to cut off the DPN part of it, only Enfield uses that terminology. I mean, that's one of the things that makes it so difficult. And so when the first opinion was looked at, it was from the perspective of not only that prior opinion in 2013, but that the language says application. But when you look at the statute, the application that's referenced is one for regulated activity. So there's a big difference there, because that's not when you're typically when you're with the agent approval, then there's been a decision that there's no more than a minimal impact. So I think to your question, Commissioner, it should be more like the model regs, not to use confusing terminology, and maybe see what other towns have done. And as I said, DPN is just a unique animal to Enfield. And what you really are talking about when you look at the other regs is that it's a request. It's basically to see, allowing the agent to make this determination about whether or not this activity can go forward without the full application for a regulated activity. So I don't know if that clarifies.
No, that's fair, and that makes sense. And, again, I know we've talked about it. I think staff's in the initial draft of updated regulations, so I think obviously we're going to run them by you, but I just kind of want to get some of that preliminary guidance from you guys before we go ahead, start putting pen to paper.
And I
And I
have,
think what's interesting is that even though this language has been inconsistent, there hasn't been a problem in all the decades it's been here.
Nope.
So it's certainly
Yeah, we've been doing this
looked
for
at.
years.
Right.
So,
But,
just like we did.
right, except that to my knowledge, there has not been a petition when it's been a DPN.
Right.
That's unusual. So it's been, while it's inartful language and it's inconsistent with the statute, and the last legal opinion from the town attorney said the recommendation is to change that. As a practical matter, it hasn't been misapplied through the years, other than it became an issue within the last year, and it had to be looked at. And actually, it was kind of the silver lining here, is it made you realize, or certainly brought to our attention, that it would be best to have regs that were revised and were more consistent with the statute, so that people aren't saying, well, is it an application or isn't it?
Yeah, this has actually come up a number of times at Kakiwick, this exact thing, and it's basically they're saying the same thing
Right,
in all the legal workshops.
Attorney Ziska, who I'm sure you're
I was
familiar
just going to
with,
say him.
who's really, has mentioned this in his book, and he has literally written the book for the last 30 years for the DEP. He's a scientist as well as an attorney, and frankly, whether you agree with him or not on other issues, he certainly is very learned in this particular issue, and his book talks about this, and the DPN does not, or the equivalent of a DPN does not typically, or is not subject to a petition process.
and we follow that book very closely when reviewing applications for what's legally required. So we do need to revise the regs. That will be the ultimate end goal of all this. And then I have no problem, if you would like to see other towns' regs, I have no problem spending time to do some research and put together a packet for you to review other towns' regs as well. I do have a lot of other towns who've actually already reached out because they've seen some of our meetings. I forgot the name of one of them. It's a different town way, way, way out there. They actually have mentioned some beneficial stuff, and I can print out the emails for you for the next meeting about like site walk conductions and jurisdictional rulings, and I think it might help the agency moving forward just to see what those other towns do. So this one kind of leads into our next item for conflict in the regulations. Sorry, do you have any other questions about DPNs?
Still didn't ask my question.
With regard to the application you just had, no, that's, we had contemplated whether we needed to do an executive session, but we weren't going to talk about any specific cases.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
the application was just here, failed, saying we do not require termination of the permit. That failed. So does that mean we are requiring it?
It's not a permit, though. That's the difference.
Then it needs to come forward with an application.
So technically, if our regs were correct, we should have a separate form for that. That way farmers can fill that out for exemptions.
Okay, we currently don't. So
I know.
what we currently have, how does this go forward?
So, may I,
That's my question.
Yeah. and
may I opine? No?
Yeah, frankly, if I could, Madam Chair, I would ask staff, only because in this case, to be honest with you, I've not confronted this particular issue.
I mean, I don't want to leave you.
No, understood. No, absolutely, right.
Right.
Understood.
And he also has to go to PZC for excavations, so.
Madam
Yeah,
Chair,
I
do
would
you
just
want-
add,
can I-
based off our precedent, if a motion to not require a DPN fails, we've required a permit. So my understanding is that would be the way forward.
That's what we've always done. The DPNs fail, a permit is required. Same for 59 Cottage, 92 Post Office, and so forth.
So,
And that was certainly the decision that was made with 92 Post Office.
Yes. So moving on, this one kind of piggybacks off DPNs. Okay. The conflict in the regs, and this is also in the wetlands regs, where there's a conflict, the act shall govern. The issue with this one is on our application checklist, that needs to be modified because we cannot require wetlands to be delineated on adjacent properties. So that's something else that we discovered as a issue for our application, and that the act has to govern as a conflict.
We do have a right to have soil scientists go on.
Non-private property.
Yes, we do.
Can you show me the statute that says that?
-30 state statutes says entry onto public or private property to carry out wetlands watercourses responsibilities. The commissioner or his or her authorized agent representative shall have the right to enter upon any public or private property at reasonable times to carry out the provisions of wetlands.
Doesn't relate
Because
to applications.
we have to look at knowing where, for us to do our job, we have to know where the wetlands are. And if we don't know where the adjoining wetlands are, we can't do our job.
Yeah,
And so-
Madam Chair, I would add, that might be something we could maybe request a legal opinion on, because I know in the research I did,
legal
there
opinion.
was some case law that said, neighboring properties can be delineated in order to determine the regulated areas. So that might be something, through the chair to the town attorney, if we could possibly get a ILO on that.
We have a right, because we have to know where the wetlands are.
We have a legal opinion on that from 92 Post Office where it says we cannot require that because what if the neighboring property that you need information on, what if the owner says no? And it doesn't always have to be town property. It could be Frank's property and he's like, no. How would you take that determination?
According to the law, which is what we follow, Section 22A-30 allows us to go on to public or private property to look at the wetlands and to delineate the wetlands. So we have an idea where the wetlands are.
I just respectfully have to disagree with your interpretation. There's case law behind this. It's not legal. And this refers to the state commissioner for watercourse and wetland responsibilities. It does not pertain to pending applications.
So, Madam Chair?
Can we get the lawyer's
I was gonna just
perspective on
say-
that, please? Is the law?
We have a legal opinion.
Yeah, I think the benefit of, you have the statute, and reading it certainly is helpful. But I think many times there are cases that will discuss the context in which one can allow further delineation of the wetlands. And so, you might have one case that says yes and one case that says no, and I think that's where context is important, whether it's with a pending application that you can say, hey, I want to go over here to the neighbors and I'd like to go ahead and delineate that, versus generically just for you to determine where the wetlands are. So it might be beneficial to Commissioner Cover's point to look at it a little more carefully, under what circumstances such review of other properties, because basically you can only, one of the things that, and I regret having missed June 1st, unfortunately I was not well, but when the act is inconsistent with the regs, then the act is going to prevail. So I think looking at the cases with more detail might help answer the question. But you only, as an agency, any of these administrative boards, planning and zoning, ZBA, wetlands, only have the authority that's given to you under the statute and as interpreted by the judiciary. So really, we really want to make sure, when we give you this advice, it's only to protect us in the cases of appeal. We want to make sure that that's,
Yes.
you're being protected.
I understand that, but I will tell you that Post Office Road was frustrating for me sitting up here,
Yes,
not
it was.
knowing what was right next to there and not being able to do it was just, it was the
Especially
most
on that-
frustrating
yeah.
I've been on this
Especially when it was
board.
town land.
And it was town land, and they didn't give us permission to do that. So that was the most
Yes.
frustrated I've been on this commission.
Yeah, we had court documents, we had sworn statements, we had past employees, we had all kinds of information stating that was pristine wetlands next to us, and we were not allowed to see it, and that is totally wrong. We had every right to look at that. So,
We'll have to review.
enough
the
with that
opinion
application,
again.
but
I'm assuming it was our attorney that gave that.
I think Lori can actually provide some clarification.
Well, so I mean, I was a wetlands agent for, I think, 9 years total, but, and I was always told that that was not permitted. But as we are discussing, we're going to need to review and update our wetlands regulations. And this is certainly something we could look into and make sure we have it correct.
Yes, that's the main point, just to make sure that you are acting in the proper jurisdiction and that we're just being careful.
because with that, you have to know if the person on the current property application is going to disturb those wetlands, send runoff into those wetlands, disturb the waterways for the brooks and that. That's a very important information you have to know to make a decision, because you don't want people to disturb the wetlands next door, disturb, the waterways or the brooks or anything else.
Okay.
In that case, we may have protected ourselves, but we may have
Yes,
ruined the
exactly.
wetlands.
Right.
So, in the interest of time, let's put a legal opinion down for that. We're going to move on. The next one would be sidewalk rules for no public discussion or communication. Just to reiterate some of those rules to protect yourselves, that you are only allowed to take notes, discuss orientation amongst yourselves, but then everything else is brought back to the meeting at the next time the agency meets. So there shouldn't be discussion, and the sidewalk exists where the agency is walking and where the applicant brings them.
There should be no conversation amongst numerous people. Maybe somebody might have an observation. It's like, oh, yeah, there's the wetlands that we were looking at, and that's delineated as number 2. So you could get a feel for where it is. But other than that, there should be no conversation as to what the application is. So, and notes should be taken.
Anything else?
It's tantamount, that's
Yeah,
tantamount
yeah, we've done
to
that
a
all the
meeting.
time. Yeah.
To a meeting. So we have
yeah, that's
opinions
fine.
going back over 20 years that talk about that. And
Yeah.
I think you
Yeah,
probably
we know that. Thank you.
understand that. Okay.
We just need to avoid that public conversation part of the sidewalks.
Thank you.
Moving on, predetermination. Yes, there's 3 more things. Predetermination and ex parte communication. Just as a reminder, we cannot predetermine on the record. So you cannot say, if this is not done, I will vote no, or if this is done, I will vote yes. That's predetermination. That is an appealable action to Superior Court. Another thing is ex parte communication, to not talk about items on your agendas with public residents. They have to come to the meeting and they can speak for you at the public hearing. That's when you can have those public input. That's to protect yourselves, to remember not to do that or say that on the record.
So with all due respect for staff, was that a question for the town attorney, or was that
No,
just
it's just a general
statement?
note
No,
that
just a statement.
we were all, just to protect yourself as the land use
Just a
board.
statement.
It's important. There's been so many appeals for that. Moving on, the scope of jurisdiction, just as a little friendly reminder that, you guys are the wetlands agency. You regulate and follow what's in the wetlands regs, water
Who
courses.
asked these questions anyways, by the way?
It's
Excuse me.
Everything from the past
They're
that
not
we've
questions
worked
that we've
on.
asked, so just wondering where they're coming from. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I
It's
think this was, when we had our land use training, there were
Yes.
issues we didn't get to cover. And so
Yes.
we had been asked to do a follow-up standalone with the Wetlands Commission, and that's
Thank
what
you.
we were trying to do.
Thank you for saying that.
And just going back to that, just a reminder that we're not the Flood Board or the PZC or the ZBA or the Conservation Commission or so forth. The Wetlands Agency jurisdiction lies strictly within those wetland soils in the 100-foot upland review area. And that was the last item to cover. Lori will close this off. Or Maria.
Do you want to say anything first?
Certainly, if you do have any questions on any of this, and again, regrettably, not everything was covered that night, so we appreciate having this opportunity if you did have questions, especially around the DPNs, and hopefully that'll be resolved with some amendments to the regs. And if there are any other questions, we'll certainly follow through on verifying exactly, in writing so that we don't misunderstand the scope of the question with respect to neighboring properties.
Thank you.
But thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much.
Appreciate it.
We'll let you get on with your business. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Jen, for coming.
So,
And I want to,
so I just wanted,
for the record, Kevin arrived at 6:50.
Madam Chair, do you want me to do just a quick conclusion?
Sure.
So I just want you to realize that we are here to help you. We are hired because we have experience and training. We keep up with the case law, we keep up with the statutes, and we try to make sure that the regulations are kept up to date. Case in point, this DPN versus jurisdictional ruling. It is very clear, but when some of the terminologies or the application versus request, it makes a huge difference. So those are things that we try to look out for. And, when we review an application, we do it on the merit of the application. We try to be as unbiased as possible. We basically are Switzerland. So I just want you to realize that we do that so we can help you review the application in less time. So we tried to work with the applicant ahead of time and just work with them and maybe suggest some modifications that we think that the commission would prefer. We don't make any decisions, we realize that, but we are here to help you and try to keep you and the town from litigation. So that's, we should be a team. We want to be a team with you, and we want to work with you and help you. So, and if you have questions or you would like us to do something else, to help you, let us know. But, we really are hired to help the commissions. So
And to serve the
let
public
us use
trust.
our experience and expertise to help you.
So moving forward, new business, IW 685, 157 South Road, application for a wetland permit for the development of a 3-storage unit. Eric Hewitt, applicant, National Fleet Leasing LLC, owner map 55, lot 82, I-1 zone. Hi, could you state your name and address for the record? And welcome.
Good evening.
Hi.
My name is Martin Brogy. I'm a soil scientist.
Hi.
And this is Eric Hewitt.
Hi.
My wife, Chrissy.
There's another chair right there you can grab.
Yeah.
And this is Russ Hines, the surveyor for the project. I've been working with Eric and Chrissy since about 7 years ago on this site when
Okay.
they originally purchased the property. It was a vacant auto body shop.
Mhm.
And they came through the Wetlands Commission and Planning and Zoning for the re-permitting, the repurposing of the facility. At that time, I did the wetland delineation in and around the building and into the field and into the woods because we were looking at various alternatives. And-
Oh, his microphone's off? Sorry.
Should I start over?
Go ahead, go ahead.
Thank you. And all that permitting went through pretty smoothly. They didn't increase any impervious areas associated with that project whatsoever. They added some landscaping around the parking lot perimeter as recommended by town staff. And they did remove, a variety of items that were out in the yard, including a fenced area and some exterior equipment storage. If you go there now, you'll see a very neat and tidy facility. And they've done a nice job with it. And they've been talking the last few years about using that grassed area north of the building for some development purposes, and have been in and out of town staff talking about some ideas. Russ Hines has located all the wetland flags that I went out there. I went back again in April and extended my wetland line to include and encompass the area of the proposed development that you see before you. And then we worked with Russ to look at a variety of alternatives associated with the site. And I think all 3 alternatives were included in your packets. And town staff commented on those. And we ended up with just a 3,300 square foot impact of wetlands for the entrance into the facility off the southeast corner of the proposed development area, just north of the landscaping associated with the existing building. I hope everyone has a copy of the wetland report that I prepared and submitted, dated June 10th. In that, I included a series of historic aerial photographs just to let the commission know and town staff know how disturbed this site is. It's an old agricultural area, as much of the town is, obviously. And due to a shallow water table, the area was heavily ditched, by the 1920s and 1930s. And the ditches were subsequently reconfigured a couple of times. So the area was sort of turned upside down. When I first went out to do the wetland delineation, it was a real head scratcher because I was seeing, wetland soils that were buried and overturned, wondering if it was relic soil conditions, which is fairly rare and always a head scratcher. But managed to put together a wetland line that I felt very comfortable with, given the resources that were out there and the soil observations that were made. The entire grassed area where there are wetlands is basically just the result of wetland soil conditions and glade soil horizon within 20 inches of the surface. And the area is just a grass hayfield. For the most part, the wetland fringes on the east side of the project. There is a ditch with Phragmites in it off to the west, but nothing in and around adjacent to the project of any value whatsoever. I did find when I went out there in April after significant rain, there was a small depression that I mentioned in my report where there was some deer tongue grass growing, much to my surprise, but there was enough moisture there to bring in that particular species, which is actually rather tolerant. The impact area for the driveway is just grass lawn, but it turned up to be wetland soils underneath. You couldn't really tell from the surface. So we worked with Mr. Luzak, an engineer that Russ brought in, who I think is very familiar with the town of Enfield. And he developed the proposed stormwater detention basin system, which looks to be pretty robust. It includes a snow shelf and a forebay, and then a detention basin which will hold the water, and it addresses both stormwater quality and stormwater quality prior to discharging to the existing drainage along South Road. We did speak with Georgie this afternoon, and we're wondering if there were any other additional comments other than her report from town staff. And we're certainly interested in hearing from the commission to see if anybody has any additional questions. I know you took receipt last month. We're hoping to, I know there's a draft resolution proposed, and we're hoping the commission takes action tonight for this so we can move this forward. These guys are very anxious to get started on their project and have to face, obviously, planning and zoning as well. So we thank you.
So there's 3 recommended site specifics on my report, and the only update I have regarding departmental comments is this has not yet been reviewed by the engineering department. The assistant town engineer was out on medical leave for like 2 weeks or so, so it just has not been reviewed by engineering. That is the only thing missing from the application.
It does mention an underground infiltration system for the roof runoff. Yeah.
Did you address that?
Did you address that? Has that been addressed?
That's a question for you guys.
To incorporate an underground infiltration system for the roof runoff?
For the record, Russell Heinz. Jim Lusak suggested that we take those buildings and put the roof leaders into underground, and we got 2 sections of concrete galleys underground, covered by stone. There's a little detail of what the galley looks like on the detail page, and I think they're both 20-foot sections, or so there's 40 foot of underground that just takes that water, filters it a little bit, and then dumps it into the detention basin. He says that's more than sufficient to take any of the sediments that are sitting on the roofs over time from whatever, the smoke from Canada, so.
Yeah. The other question I had was, the staff comments under buildings was, the buildings may need a sprinkler protected depending on the layout, not interior access only. Didn't know what that meant and what the
Building
impact
code
was.
questions that they can deal with during the building permit process.
For fire.
Yeah, okay, good. I don't know if there's any impact to what we're doing, but.
The only thing that really halts this application is that the stormwater report and that drainage part of the project just hasn't been reviewed by our town engineer yet. So if the application is to be continued because of that, the applicant would have to provide an extension.
For the record, I cannot see anything that the town engineer would say that would have any impact on the wetlands because we are kept all that area. The only impact on the wetlands really is the entrance.
Though that may be the case, say, for example, the agency approves you tonight, and then John Cabibbo reviews the plans when you go to PCC, and for some crazy reason he has a comment that requires you to change something, that would affect your wetlands approval.
Right.
So you'd have to modify your wetlands permit. So just some things to keep in mind, just going forward, that's all.
We're confident.
Engineering.
Right, yeah. So if there were any changes, that they'd have to come back to us anyway.
Yeah, and then one of the planning comments to address that roof detention system is to accommodate for a decrease for the 5-year storm event.
I just had a question, Georgie. The drainage report we got on June 14th, is that correct? And it hasn't been reviewed?
No, because the assistant town engineer has been on medical leave. He's been dealing with some health issues, and he's just been out, and we don't have a backup assistant engineer to review these.
So we don't have a time when this could even be reviewed.
What was that question?
We don't have a time that this could be reviewed because we don't have an engineer to
It
look
should
at
be
it.
reviewed pretty fast. I'm just not sure. If you're comfortable approving it tonight, that is up to you as the agency. Just know that, say, for example, it approves and engineering wants it to be changed, they just have to modify their permit. That's all.
That'd be fine.
Depending on, of course, what the comment is.
Anything major would have to come back.
Yeah, anyways, no matter what.
Yeah, I just don't I know we've approved applications before without them being complete, but moving forward, we're just trying to be more consistent and just make sure everything is satisfied. But then that uninspected incident occurred, and now we're just a little bit under a weird area here.
I know, and we were the ones that asked to make sure that
Yes,
we were getting
and you
comments from
especially
every
wanted-
department. I understand
yes.
that.
And you even
I don't want
asked for the-
applicant has to wait months and months is not fair.
Yep.
It's not right either.
And you stressed the importance of the historical files because there was a lot going on way back when the body shop was being built. So that was one of my thoughts as to why you might want to wait for the engineering review, but again, that's up to you.
I remember this application, I remember the
Yeah, I
planning.
remember,
Yeah.
because you were.
There's issues with the contamination aspects.
Septic system.
Yes,
and the
your
septic
names were all over it.
I remember it. And we
You
had,
had to come back a few times, I remember.
we talked about different plantings and things, and I didn't see it on her sheet she gave us, so I was surprised.
For the record,
Must have been
there's
other meetings.
one of the things that's said about, in that report about the septic system, this has nothing, there is absolutely, the only thing that's for utilities is going to be electricity.
Right. Yeah, I just remember the talking with
Yeah.
all the plants and everything, and how we made sure they were all good, and,
That septic system was supposed to be reviewed
right.
yearly or something? Is
Something like
that,
that.
was
Is that-
that being done? That was my,
Pumped out.
okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, that's good.
And then I would like to add a
That was
site
supposed to be
specific-
reported to the
sorry.
town, though, correct?
Yes.
And that's being done?
I believe so, yes. I don't know what the status is currently.
We could do it.
I try my best. I do want to add one more site-specific, just to include the proposed topography versus the existing topography on the same page, just to see the difference in grading. And then, of course, the sediment and erosion controls should be included along the 128 contour line in addition to proposed ENS locations. And then there's a typo in my second site-specific. It says plants, but it should say plans, so don't say plants when you read the site-specific. Apologies for that one. I was thinking of plants.
Okay, so, Kevin, you had a comment?
I had just suggested we could either act on it today. We could also do an agent approval pending the review from the engineering department. Because we've gone over the site, I remember, significantly at that past.
Oh, yeah, past time.
Approval. So I would feel comfortable with that. And that might eliminate any issues with them having to come back as if
Yeah,
engineering.
if that's what you're comfortable with, sure. We can look at it more when the engineering comment comes back. They still have to go to PZC too, so
Right.
maybe it will come in for PZC and hopefully it won't be a big change to their plans.
And
And also, yeah,
I'm happy to act on it tonight.
To
too,
approve it
myself.
tonight.
Yeah.
Did you
Mr.
hear that
Mazur, I would
fourth?
just, one question on that, though. I know for agent approvals, I believe that's only in the upland review area, since there is
Yeah, you're right.
minimal
You're right.
wetland
Right, this is-
impact. I
yeah.
don't think that's an
That's
option.
why I said it depends on what the review comes back as, depending on where that drainage goes to.
I
Commissioner
think we
Kober's
should vote
correct,
on it
yeah.
tonight as
Yep.
an application
Yep.
with the premise that if there's any engineering concerns, it will be brought
Yeah,
to your
sure.
attention.
and they got to come back
And then
anyway.
did you hear me say I
Yep.
added for number 4 for
Yep.
topo and proposed, same page, okay.
Yep.
And actually, that did lead me to a question that I had. Looking at and again, it was kind of hard flipping back between the pre and the post. But it does look like the site, so I think it's flipped north and south. So to say towards the auto body shop where you're at 128, and then down in the lower right on the map, you guys are down to like 124. So it looks like there is going to be some fill. Are you guys bringing in fill?
There
that
is
coming
fill.
from-
There is.
Can you guys just talk about how much and where it's coming from?
The fill will have to be brought in. So it's going to have to be, there's the site, obviously we suspect there's going to be quite a bit of topsoil. So we're going to have to fill that, but the site really does slope all the way, and we're keeping that same slope going down. So I'm going to say we're raising the site a foot all through it, the whole thing. But the amount of fill that's going in is going to have to be brought in
Yeah, and,
because he has to get a better sub base there.
and fill is a significant activity, so.
Just a comment from me. So I would lean in favor of continuing it, just getting that engineer's comments, just in the event that there are any changes.
Looks, I don't know, it looks fine to me the way it is. Yeah, I'm ready to go. Yeah. Motion?
Just wording for the fourth site-specific condition.
So the proposed versus the existing topography will be on the same page.
Okay.
And then, of course, number 2, plans, not plans. Thank you. But other than that, that was it. And I don't know if you wanted them to provide documentation on that fill that's brought in or not, just a thought I wanted to put out
Make it a
there.
fifth, yeah.
Yeah, make it a fifth.
In the detail for the pavement, it'll be a process aggregate is what's going to be brought in. It's just a matter of how much, depending on what we get for, how much topsoil is there. In certain spots, it'll probably be more than what's in the required.
Yeah, part.
So, I had another question. I know this kind of overlaps with PZC a little bit, but is there going to be any lighting at the storage unit, like exterior lighting, anything that's projecting outward? I know, like if it illuminates the wetlands, that could be an issue for wildlife, stuff like that. So,
Details will be provided on source.
But
For the fill?
historically, I think most of those storage places have just the lights on the side of the building. There's not like,
Do
yeah,
they-
no like spot or floodlights or anything like that.
Do they point downwards towards
right.
the ground, not
Yeah,
out,
it would
right?
be all
Okay.
code compliant,
Yeah.
Yeah, that-
nighttime compliant.
They need to be full cut off and downlit.
Yeah,
And the
that's
last
that's a
thing-
P and Z thing anyway, so.
The last thing I had was snow storage.
Yeah, it was on there.
Yeah, it was on
It
there.
was on, it was on the plan.
Mind, just making sure you're aware.
Yeah, it was on the
It
plan.
was on, I think
It was
that
on
was
the
on the
plan.
plan.
It was on the plan.
Yeah.
Never mind. I knew that.
All right.
So, did you want them to provide a lighting plan or no? They don't need that.
Not for
Okay.
us. no.
Okay, I'm gonna cross that out.
Yeah, he does, he has it.
Yeah, I got it. Yep. All right, so I can make a motion?
Yeah.
All right, I will make a motion to approve IW number 685, 157 South Road application for wetland permit for the development of 3 self-storage units. Eric Hewitt, applicant, National Fleet Leasing LLC owner, map 55, lot 82, I-1 zone. With the site-specific conditions, number 1, final plans will include a cover sheet, and all sheets will include a legend. Number 2, details for the underground detention system to accommodate for roof runoff will be added to the plans.
Thank you.
I don't think, okay. Number 3, sediment and erosion controls will be included along the 128 contour in addition to the proposed ENS control location to protect the well location from the nearby temporary soil stockpile that is to be located in its proximity. Number 4, proposed versus existing topo will be on the same page. And number 5, details will be provided on source and type for fill brought into the site. And then our standard
Conditions.
conditions.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Nancy, do you want to do roll call since you have it?
Sure. Donna Corbin Sabinski,
Yes.
Kevin Zorda,
Yes.
Virginia Higley,
Or,
Robert Hendrickson,
Yes.
Nancy Martin, yes. Phil Kober,
Abstaining.
Christopher Reno.
Yes.
That's okay. I don't need it.
6 in favor, 1 abstain, motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck, gentlemen.
Good luck.
Is this one that was out when that was on vacation? Is that done?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, that was the one. No,
Okay, next on our agenda is
Figure it
IW.
out later.
I think you finished that one before I came in.
You ready?
Sorry.
Okay. Next on the agenda is IW 686, rear of 38 Post Office Road. Yep. Application for a wetland permit to allow outdoor storage and processing of a construction materials, Spazzarini Construction Company LLC. Applicant, excuse me, St. Thomas Realty Associates LLC owners, map 47, lot 12, I-1 zone. Welcome. Could you state your name and addresses for the record?
So, Madam Chair, just before they start, and I know we had kind of looked at this one before, I just wanted to float the idea, because I think this one also has significant grading. If we wanted to potentially see the significant activity, if we want to talk about requiring a public hearing on this, just again, so they don't have to do the full presentation if we're going to have them come back.
Okay, so. So for public hearings, there's a few reasons to have a public hearing. The wetland determines if proposed activity has a significant impact, like we said. A petition was signed by at least 25 people and presented to us within 14 days of the date of receipt of the application. Such application will be of public interest. Public hearing shall be held no later than 65 days after the receipt of the application. That being said, we received the application on June 10th, and June 20th, which is 10 days, July is 30, August is 35, September is 76.
It was received on June 20th.
Say that again?
It was received on June 20th, and then we didn't receive a petition, and technically that was still your review period, so you can still decide today if you wanted to hold that public hearing, I believe.
No, if you
Wait.
got a petition.
And the abutters on this property is Route 81 and York.
For the most part, yes, on that side, yes.
And have we had anybody say anything since we've been talking about this property or on the public hearing?
No, we haven't heard anything, no.
No, but for significant activities, if you would like to, you still can have a public hearing on the application. That's what I just said. I just said that.
So I'm saying we haven't heard anything, nobody's complained, nobody's said anything. We're doing this for a long time. I don't believe we need a public hearing.
Again, yeah, definitely up to the commission. Like I said, I just want to float the idea, because again, this one does, we're grading from 120 up to, I think, 130, significant chunk. So I just wanted to, again, float that before we proceeded.
Thank you very much for saying that. So, all set then, I guess, to go.
Good evening. For the record, Jay Ursary, J.R. Russo and Associates here. Pitch hitting tonight for Dana Steele, my partner, who is in another town. We had a little meeting conflict, so you ended up with me. Not sure if that's good or bad, but anyway, I'm here. I'm sure my wife's happy to have me out of the house. So, also here with me, Mark Spazzarini, who is the applicant, and George Logan from REMA Ecological Services, who I know you all know. He's our soil scientist. So, I guess you're all fairly familiar with this because you've seen it before. Now it's here in the form of an actual application for a permit to conduct some regulated activities. So I think from this point moving forward, this is what we have on the record from the acceptance of the app. And so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in terms of describing where we are and what we did. I think you all pretty much know that. So I know Georgie and staff has been waiting for George to come up with his wetland report and his delineation report, and George has that this evening, so we're going to submit that for the record, and I think I'll let George give you a description of the site itself and the existing wetlands, and probably, I'm sure he's going to talk a little bit about the site in terms of what it's been in the past, because I see George has got some aerial photography there, and I brought some as well to show you if we need to, as to what the past uses of this parcel have been, which is basically agriculture. So that said, let's let George talk to you a little bit about the site and the condition of the site.
George Logan for the record. By the way, that was quite an interesting conversation you folks were having with your town attorney. And I was polling the audience as my other colleague there. And just a little segue. In my experience, I've had the same issue as several towns where I cannot delineate on other people's land. However, I can look over a property boundary and say, I think the wetlands are here, and this is what they look like. Because as you said, Madam Chairman, it's important for you to know what where these resources are. But I had a situation, as an example, in Bloomfield where I put one flag on someone else's property, and I was basically castigated for that. And they had to remove that wetland flag, A1, from the plan, and my delineation started at A2. So, any rate, again, I apologize for the lateness of providing information to the Commission that they had requested before. I spent about 2.5, 3 weeks in Europe. I just came back a couple of weeks ago, but it's taking me that long for me to get my feet under me. I still wanted to be there. But at any rate, so you have your requisite wetland delineation report. What I also did, which is usually, I usually wouldn't provide photographs with the wetland delineation report, but because this whole thing started with a notice of violation, and so it's an active case, if you will, I wanted to provide some very current photographs from today, from this afternoon. And I guess the bottom line is that the site is doing a lot better than I thought it would, so I'm surprised. And the reason I'm saying that is because of these storms that we've had lately. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what's going on out there? The soils are sandy enough to receive the water, and the combination of the wood chip berm and the silt fence have done wonderfully as far as protecting from sediment going into the wetland. Now, there's been a few fines of what we call colloidal particles, which can get through, and you're going to look in the wetland, you'll see some kind of discolored water, but that's not sediment. It's just of what's going, as the water's moving through the berm, and the wood chip berm is decaying. It's releasing some of the components of lignin and so on that's moving into the wetland and discoloring the water. But that's so it's really not an impact. So I went out there, and in the area that we're restoring, which is, and by the way, that's why one of the reasons I provided this is, I didn't label it. This is a 2004 aerial photograph, and I could provide additional ones, but I usually like to use these because they're so clear. The state did a wonderful job when they took these, and you can see that signature in the middle of an open area, and that's the area that it converted back into what we call rooted old forest, some vegetation not really mature at all, which was what was inadvertently cut down. The area of restoration, which has been delineated, and you see that in the plan, I'll point it out to you. And this was the big surprise, because if you look at the soil map that the state provides, the soil survey, there might have been a little bit of wetland that came in here, and you can see, I think Georgia provided some exhibits in her memo for that, and you can see a little thing coming in this way, but the rest of it didn't show any wetland, so this was a little bit of a surprise to my client. But we delineated the wetlands all the way to just past the clearing, if you will. I also did it in the woods because I wanted to show where the wetlands were in comparison. I ended up here. I did look at a seasonally flooded area here in March and in May, and then here, and of course there, to determine that we don't have any vernal pool habitats, meaning there are no egg masses from spotted salamanders or wood frogs. There was a few green frogs that were a little bit upset at me when I was searching through. But as you can see, that area is now, based on the pictures, is really coming back gangbusters. You know, when something like this happens, the volunteer species that are already in the seed banks that are popping up are the ones that will come up this season, and then they will be taken over by other things next season. So what's coming up is a lot of sedges, and you can see that yellow cast. These are fine leaf sedges that are coming up. They haven't produced any perigynia yet because this is so young, so I can't tell you exactly which species it is. I might be able to do that at some point. But there's a lot of vegetation that's coming back. I see propagules from the rhizomes of things like silky dogwood and northern arrowwood is coming up. So I expect that those will come up pretty fast. And the reason I wanted to, kind of fortuitous that I waited so long to look at it, because that's going to inform my wetland restoration and my wetland mitigation plan going forward. And I just didn't want to just throw something out there and then come back and say, well, yeah, I got to change it or have questions in my mind as to what's going to happen. Some pictures, so I included pictures that showed that there is some sediment that has been caught off the site up against the silt fence in one particular area, which is very close to the slope that goes up to the facility, the construction yard, if you will. And there's a discharge that comes all the way from the highway in a swale is historic. That will probably, I think the staff has asked us to address that too, going forward. Who was the gentleman that was walking with us on the site in early June, late May?
Rick Rochelle.
Right, and so he asked us to address that swale going down. So you can see there has been some sediment movement through that swale and from the site. So that's the only area where we will have to keep an eye so that it doesn't blow through. I'm very happy to say it didn't blow through even with all these storms that we had. That's photo number 12 if you're kind of looking at it. But if you look at photo number 11, that's on the other side of the berm from what you see in photo number 10, which is that little wetland lobe that was disturbed, which is right in here. And there's been some movement of water that's coming down this way and from wherever the swale is. And so I was kind of paying attention to that just to be sure that it didn't blow through, but it hasn't. So that's wonderful news. What I've seen shown in some of the other photographs, I know they're not particularly clear, is to give you some indications of the areas that are being restored. Photo number 5, if you look at that, I mean, you know what happens sometimes when I take a photograph, it looks very clear on the screen, and then I turn it into a PDF, not so good. But that photo, if you see the little pink there, that's swamp milkweed. And the white is some mountain mint, and then there's some boneset behind there and some other things that are coming up, and that's in the area that's cleared. That's not necessarily indicative of the entire site. That's a portion of the site that we're going to be restored that has the best characteristics right now, so I'm expecting that some of that's going to carry out in some of these other areas. So that's going to inform what I'm going to end up doing, which most likely will be, because I think I see what's coming up. Thankfully, with the exception of a couple of purple loosestrife, there's no invasives that I've seen coming up, which is great. In the wetlands, there's some in the uplands, but that's going to be taken care of by what's being proposed. But most likely what's going to happen is we're going to go into the restoration area and pick in random 12 spots, scarify, and plant. so that whatever we plant then will spread in years to come. And then we'll do clusters of shrubs here and there, again, for them to that's kind of what I'm thinking at the top of my head. So there's a little bit of work to do per your request from your staff. You're going to get a wetlands assessment report that tells you in more detail what I've just kind of briefly went through right now. And you'll have a full wetland mitigation plan. You've seen remember what we did in, what was the one that we did? The one that I was doing an application in 2022 for the storage.
Maybe try to stay to this application for the purpose of the record.
Correct, but this is an example of the kind of information I've provided to this commission before. A full 6 or 7 or 8 pages of implementation notes.
Oh, yes.
That kind of thing. So you'll see something similar that's going to be both in the report and then also put on the plan.
That was 29 Moody.
Excuse me?
29 Moody came back to me.
Thank you.
But yeah, you're just missing the wetlands. Well, you gave that now, and that just hasn't been reviewed by staff. And then the prudent and feasible alternatives analysis because of the significant activity of fill, and those are the only things missing.
And that's going to be part of the wetlands assessment report.
And then the approval conditions are still in progress, and they have not been finalized.
I don't know if you have, there's probably a lot more that you probably have questions on, but I just want to give a quick overview.
Oh, no, you're fine. Was all this, Mr. Spazzarini, was all this farmland like a long time ago?
This area, I grew up there.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking you.
Actually, Jim Richards, he's passed away, lived on Oliver Road, and they used to hay that whole field.
Yeah, this whole thing.
Yeah, and if you look at it at Google Earth, you could see the difference in the property, the wooded section and the section that we cleared.
Yeah.
You know, like I say, I used to actually ride a snowmobile through that field, and then then subsequently, because it's landlocked,
They stopped farming.
in there and never got farmed, and then just over
Everything overgrown. That's what I thought. I thought it was farmland. That was mentioned a few times before.
Actually, for the record, Jay Ursary, J.R. Russo, I did look at some of the historical photos, and some of you, or certainly the staff, is familiar with the Yukon website, which takes us back to 1934, which essentially shows this entire area in agriculture. There wasn't a tree on any of it. And as I followed it forward, you start to see some of the areas that were really much wetter started to fill in with vegetation. However, this one, as George has shown you in his photo, and I did the same thing, actually. I started at 2006 and brought it up forward up until 2006 from 1970. And you can clearly see that it's all been farmed. It's maybe gotten a little bit smaller, but it's all been hayed right up to 2006, and maybe that's when whoever the farmer was disappeared. I'm not sure, but you're correct in that Mark grew up in the house that's right there on Post Office Road, and this was the playground in the backyard, which was the hayfield. And
right.
hence his thought that, well, this isn't wetlands, it's a farm. It's a farm field, and has been for literally probably 100 years, to be honest.
That's what I thought, yeah.
And if you see, there's a portion of this pre-existing field that was not touched, so you can kind of get an idea from there of what was in the rest of the site. There's a bunch of alder, there's some willows, so it kind of speaks to sort of the wetness. And then things like crab apples. So I don't know why they're there, but they're there. And moist species also.
I do just want to point out one more thing, that the traffic and the engineering review is still in progress.
Traffic and engineering.
Not that traffic would really
Yeah, I
come
was
into play,
thinking that.
but engineering would.
I think we have the table so we can give time, because
Yeah.
we just got the wetlands, and then, the wetlands report that. Give staff time to review that.
I understand that Mr. Logan has been very busy this summer. He did manage to send me his report at the end of the day today, So it just hasn't been incorporated into my memo.
Yeah, I would propose that we table it to give you time to review the delineation report. The rest of the engineering.
We would just need one extension request from the applicant.
Actually, we have prepared the extension request.
Oh, you're
I've got it
prepared.
here, so
Perfect.
we will
We
submit
appreciate
it.
that.
That's good.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to continue IW 686, rear of 38 Post Office Road, application for a wetlands permit to allow outdoor storage and processing of construction materials, Spazzarini Construction Company LLC, applicant St. Thomas Realty Associates LLC, owners map 47, lot 12, I-1 zone, to the next regular meeting of September 5th, 2023.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Donna Corbin Sobinski.
Yes?
Kevin Zorda.
Yes.
Virginia Higley.
Yes.
Robert Hendrickson.
Yes.
Nancy Martin. Yes. Phil Kober.
Yes.
Christopher Reno.
Yes.
7 in favor, motion passes to continue to September 5th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is enforcement reports.
No enforcement updates. The ZEO is on vacation for the next week and some change.
Okay, so with that being said, I'd like to see updated enforcement reports and open permits. The last time I received them was the March meeting.
Okay.
And this is July.
Okay.
So I'd like to see these on a regular basis. We
Okay.
shouldn't have to ask all the time to keep up with them.
The enforcement reports are Rick, but I can
Yes,
give you
if you could
the.
please pass that along.
I
So
will,
Lori's here,
and I
so-
can give you the updated list of permits too.
Yeah, thank you.
For September, right?
For September.
Yes,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, next meeting. Report of planning staff?
Nothing to report.
New applications?
No applications being received.
Anything under miscellaneous?
Nothing.
Okay. The only thing I did, I wanted to mention, I wanted to thank Nikki Price for speaking at the Monday's town council meeting on our behalf. That was very nice of her to come forward and talk. And I thank her for that. Adjourn? Oh, and I do want to, Chris, I'm sorry I was late. So welcome to in the wetlands.
Thank you.
Yeah, good luck. Yeah. If you have any questions, please reach out. I'm sure we'll all be happy to help you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second. We adjourned at
Yeah, I'm looking. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes at 7:50.
7:50.